And what is up, everybody? This is Darren talking. I just finished updating my UFC game on my PS4, and I got Andrei Arlovsky, and a couple, two other guys who I've never seen before. But I'm, glad for the update. I didn't have to actually buy, pay any money for it. So I'm happy about that. And as I am, remembered, Andrei Arlovsky was a former UFC heavyweight champion, and on top of that, a lot of people don't necessarily realize this, but he was supposed to fight Frank Mir a long time ago. That was a fight that never happened, and it just got me to thinking of a bunch of fights that were supposed to happen and never did, and within just mixed martial arts in general for some of these, and I'm not talking about rematches. I'm talking about two fighters that were supposed to have fought on a certain occasion or more than one occasion and never did. And so we're gonna start off with as early back as early as I can remember. I'm gonna go with Maurice Smith, former UFC heavyweight champion, second UFC heavyweight champion. This guy was the man who basically brought striking back into UFC. Maurice Smith versus Dan Severn. The fight never happened. Dan Severn that was supposed to fight for the heavyweight title, and Dan Severn had to pull out due to injury. They put Tank Abbott in. If not for the fact that Tank Abbott had absolutely no cardio, he would have beaten Maurice Smith. Maurice Smith had to this day, doesn't necessarily have a ground game. And, his thing was all striking, and Tank took him down a bunch of times and held him down. But, the way the rules were set up, Tank had absolutely no gas. So when he stood him back up, he was just eating leg kicks because he couldn't do anything about it. And ref Big John McCarthy pretty much ends the fight in a TKO in favor of Maurice Smith. That sucks. Then later on, there's probably a bunch of fighters that I wound up skipping because the majority of them I don't necessarily know that well from whatever organizations they were in. But then you got speaking of Andre, jump straight to Andrei Arlovsky versus Frank Mir. Tim Sylvia was heavyweight champion. Then he got busted for steroids. Then, he had to relinquish the belt. And then they put him up against Frank Mir. Whoever wins gets the heavyweight title. And Frank Mir breaks Tim Sylvia's arm. Okay, now Frank Mir is the heavyweight champion. Then what happens? Frank Mir gets into a motorcycle accident. He's injured. He can't defend his title. So they put up the interim heavyweight title. Tim Sylvia just got his arm fixed up nicely. Andrei Arlovsky has been knocking dudes out left and right. So you know what? Yeah, let's put these two guys to fight. And Andrei Arlovsky submits Tim Sylvia. He is now the interim heavyweight champion, which means as soon as Frank Mir gets better, they're supposed to fight. But on top of that, he defended the interim belt twice. And I don't remember which UFC it was, maybe 56, I want to say, 50, I'm not exactly sure. It was when Joe Riggs was supposed to fight Matt Hughes for the welterweight belt, but couldn't make weight, so it was just a regular fight. And it was Nate Quarry versus Rich Franklin for the middleweight championship. And that was the day BJ Penn signed back with UFC. That was the announcement for this is how long ago this was. That was the announcement for the coaches for the Ultimate Fighter 3, which was Tito Ortiz and Ken Shamrock. And But before that, they had Andrei Arlovsky and Frank Mir standing there. It's like, yeah, these two are finally going to fight. Then what happens? I'm not exactly sure, because now all of a sudden Andrei Arlovsky is the heavyweight champion. Frank Mir fought somebody else. His was relinquished. I don't know how. And Arlovsky had to fight Tim Sylvia again and got knocked out. Then him and Frank Mir never fought. Shortly after that, Arlovsky wound up leaving. He was let go of UFC. He should have gotten he should have gotten another title shot, because he left winning. I don't know who he lost to. That UFC just let him go. But then you see him in Elite XC, you see him in Strikeforce, you see him in World Series, and UFC comes back. He has one win, which wasn't very impressive. Then he revenges his loss against Bigfoot by knocking Bigfoot Silva out. Okay, Frank Mir's still on the card. There's no reason why that can't fight. Why the two of them can't fight. Bear with me, I'm tired, so I'm stuttering. Then you got, here's another one. Robbie Lawler versus Phil Baroni. Fight was supposed to happen 2 different times, and both times Robbie Lawler had pulled out. For whatever reason. First was in UFC. I forget. I think it was UFC 51, probably. UFC 51. As a matter of fact, he was supposed to fight Robbie Lawler. Robbie Lawler pulled out. Phil Baroni wound up fighting Pete Sell. That was Phil Baroni's 3rd straight UFC loss, so he was let go. Then he reinvents himself in Pride. Starts losing a few times, lost a couple times in Pride. Then goes to Icon Pro Sport. Icon Pro, Robbie Lawler won the Icon Pro Sport middleweight title. Then he wins the Elite XC. Then he wins the Elite XC middleweight title from Ninja, from Murillo Ninja Hua, Mauricio Shogun's Hua's older brother. Wins the middleweight belt from there, unified the Icon Pro and Elite XC belts. Okay. Icon Pro Sport releases him, and he's fighting Elite XC. Robbie Lawler's fighting Elite XC, and Phil Baroni fights somebody else and loses. 2 times it was supposed to fight, and it never happened. That was a fight I wanted to see since Ultimate Knockouts 2. I saw the two of them, how hard they hit, how fast they hit, and I said to myself, man, it's a shame they're not in the same weight class. Then Robbie Lawler made the move to middleweight. I was like, oh man, that fight absolutely should happen. Didn't happen. Then when Phil Baroni moved to welterweight, still didn't happen. They were both in Strikeforce. Didn't happen. I don't get it. And now, to be perfectly honest, it's entirely too late in Phil Baroni's career to even think of trying to step up to Robbie Lawler, and it's sad because this was a guy. How do you hit that hard, that fast, that accurate, and you don't win every fight? I don't get it. He was a pretty decent wrestler. Obviously a phenomenal striker, pinpoint precision with his punches, and no belt to his name. It's sad. Even knocking out former UFC middleweight champion Dave Menne, and it's sad. Personally, I think he would have knocked out Murillo Bustamante, who took the belt from Dave Menne. I honest to God think, Phil Baroni would have at least had that, even if it was for one, one fight, just to lose it to, probably the greatest middleweight to never hold a title, Matt Lindland. So, moving along. Another this is the last two guys that I know that were supposed to have fought and did not. Diego Sanchez versus Matt Hughes. That's right. When Matt Hughes won the belt back, good for Matt Hughes, this, that, the other. But what everybody was more concerned about was Ultimate Fighter winner Diego Sanchez, who was undefeated, comes into the UFC undefeated, wins the six-figure contract, and just continues to blaze a trail through everybody they put in front of him. They put a couple nobodies in front of him, destroyed him. First somebody they put against him, Nick Diaz, destroyed him. Went up against I forget who else they put up in front of him. It was in between the fight with him and Carl Parisian. So and Carl Parisian, I honest to God thought, I lost the bet. I thought Carl Parisian was going to win that fight. I honest to God thought he was going to win that fight, and he got owned. He got dominated. I was shocked, not to mention his tooth knocked out. So, that was such an amazing fight. To this day, I think it's still like the number 3 fight in UFC history. It's ridiculous. But when he fought Carl Parisian, the idea was that whoever won would get a future title shot. But because when George St. Pierre had to pull out due to a groin injury, they put BJ Penn in because I guess Diego didn't have enough time to train or heal or anything like that. So BJ Penn took that spot and lost unfortunately, and then immediately he fights Joe Riggs, knocks Joe Riggs out. Diego Sanchez knocks Joe Riggs out. But by that time, Matt Hughes lost the belt to George St. Pierre. Diego Sanchez still undefeated, then loses to Josh Koscheck. Later on, there's not so much a mismatch of who should have been, who should have had that number 1 contender spot. Now it's actually going to happen. Diego Sanchez versus Matt Hughes. It's supposed to happen. It's going to happen. And what happens? Diego Sanchez pulls out to injury. Josh Koscheck steps in and knocks Matt Hughes out. Matt Hughes is now retired. It's sad. The more and more you think about it, how the only other person I could say, and they were never put together to have to fight, but that was a fight that everybody, well, 2 as a matter of fact, but both of them involved Randy Couture. That was Randy Couture versus Vanderlei Silva, when Vanderlei Silva was still Pride middleweight champion, and Randy Couture versus Fedor Emelianenko, because Fedor was the number 1 heavyweight in the world, period, and Randy Couture just finished winning the UFC belt. Granted, he did lose to Nogueira, who could never get that monkey named Fedor off his back, because Nogueira beat everybody else, every other Pride heavyweight, but kept running into that brick wall by the name of Fedor Emelianenko. Couldn't do it. And it's sad, because now that you think about it, now that I've mentioned it, if any true MMA fans who are familiar with most of these guys' names, you're gonna think to yourself, man, that would have been a good fight. It's like, oh man, that would have been a good fight if Robbie Lawler and Phil Baroni early on in their career. That would have been great. Diego Sanchez versus Matt Hughes. When Matt Hughes was the champion, I honestly think Diego Sanchez would have won, and he would have had King of the Cage and UFC welterweight title. Maurice Smith versus Dan Severn. Dan Severn would have had better cardio, would have tied dude up in a pretzel. And of course, Arlovsky versus Frank Mir. That remains to be seen. Anyway, I'm done talking. You guys have a good night.